soon. And in the meantime, we can have a prayer meeting, right? Or a Bible study, or some more talking and sharing about our trip. So we have some folks that weren't on our trip but were interested to see our slides. So welcome to Lenora, Cheryl, Michael in the back, everybody else, and Gene, who wasn't on our trip, but everybody else was. So we've already had a kind of reunion down the hall and had some opportunity to share some reflections and memories and some special things that we experience. And they were really, oh, there we go. So now we've lost that wondrous music. I don't know what that was. No, that's okay. That seemed like that's not quite a me kind of soundtrack. I don't know what that music is, but are we at any progress, Sandy, do you think, or we're getting there? Okay, good. So does anybody want to, so how about we do this? Let me recap the trip for those who are here and weren't with us, and that way you at least have a little context when you see the slides. So first of all, the trip was last October, and it was a 10-day trip that encompassed Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. And while we were there, any number of folks told us that the Holy Lands incorporates 5 countries. Anybody remember what those are? Israel, Jordan, Egypt, and also Syria and Lebanon. As we've probably seen in the news, lots of tension. I was very glad that we were going back when we went, and frankly, I hope this is okay to insert a little political view, but because Netanyahu was not in power at that time, it seemed like it was a much more peaceful kind of situation since he has come back into power and sort of created an environment in which a real ultra-right-wing government is doing things that is much more repressive. That's causing lots of reaction from people from lots of quarters. And so they're shooting bombs from Lebanon into Israel, from Syria into Israel, and then of course there's retaliation that is going down to the Golan Heights, or rather to, what's the little strip, the Gaza Strip. So pray for peace, pray for Israel and Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, the Holy Lands. So anyway, we did a 10-day trip, and we started in Egypt. We flew to Cairo, and that's where the group for the most part began, in Cairo. And then today, in 10 days, we saw Egypt, Upper Egypt, Jordan, and Israel. So I'm going to come back to that. Another group of people, 7 of us, flew about 4 or 5 days earlier. We flew to Cairo also, and we went from Cairo south to a town called Luxor. Luxor is right on the Nile River, and I was saying to Sandy when we were having our snacks that if you continue down the Nile River, there's this thing called the Aswan Dam, where the Nile is dammed up, and it's a great place to go scuba diving and see lots of things. But we didn't go down there. We just went to Luxor, which is about 100 miles or so south of Egypt, or Cairo. And so we started our journey in Luxor. Luxor is also called the Valley of the Kings and Queens. And so it was in Luxor that is where many of the pharaohs were buried, including King Tut. So some of the pictures that I sent to Sandy are the pictures that I took of King Tut's tomb and some of the other pharaohs. And while we were there, we went on a boat ride on the Nile River, and we saw, oxen and kind of heard the story that this is where Moses got pushed down the river and was taken by the queen. So it appears to be a story that has some question marks from the Egyptian community. Is that fair to say? That they didn't necessarily agree with all those interpretations, but I think that Moses is considered a sort of national hero and a religious figure even to Muslims. So there was definitely some recognition that that Moses was a very special character. But for many of the Egyptians, most of the Egyptians, and then consequently most are Muslim, the pharaohs were not portrayed as the bad guys like we'd see in the Ten Commandments or that we read about in the Hebrew Bible. They were recognized as incredible leaders, incredible builders. They are the ones who more or less were behind the building of the pyramids and lots of temples, lots of amazing things. And I think from the Egyptian point of view, they said that all those sites, all those incredible things were not built with Hebrew slaves. They were built with the work of the Egyptian people, not slaves. So that does lead us to the kind of the question, what do we do with the Hebrew Bible? Because this is the story that we tell about Moses and the deliverance from Egypt. And, so when you get a sort of historical perspective that might be counter to your faith perspective, you have a little bit of challenge because it's like, well, who are we going to believe? What are we going to believe? It's a little hard to deny that those pyramids are there, but it's for sure a wondrous sight, but definitely we don't really know, they don't really know how they were built and who was part of that story and how much the Hebrew people and Moses really were part of that story. So we can still have our views and our beliefs and hold to our scripture, I believe. But anyway, a lot of the pharaohs, for whatever reason, were buried down near Luxor. And there was a lot of different temples that we saw. And again, the Valley of the Kings and Queens, they've done a lot of renovations and a lot of discovery. It's a big valley, and you would just go to this valley, and somehow they found deep down, almost like a well, and inside are all these different tombs of pharaohs, including King Tut. They were pretty kind of, I don't know if scary the word, challenging, claustrophobic if you went down inside. Some of us did that, and I think several of us did one or two tombs. That was plenty. Don't need more. Come on in. Welcome. Oh, they're downstairs. Yeah. So anyway, our group did, 7 people did Luxor, and we did it for those 3 or 4 days. And then we flew back to Cairo where we met the rest of the group. So when we were in Cairo then, what did we see? We saw the Egypt Museum, which is the place where a lot of the King Tut, the artifacts, the mask, the tomb itself, the sarcophagus, lots of amazing stuff was in that Egyptian museum in Cairo. We also took a ride on a boat on the Nile River up there. We then went to a place called Saqqara, which is one of the oldest pyramids. And then we went to the big pyramids of Giza, and there's 4 or 5 of those. And in front, sort of toward the end of the day, we saw the Sphinx. That was a pretty amazing day, wouldn't everybody say? After Saqqara, again, went down into the sort of the tomb, I guess you would say. And it actually made me sick. I got out and I threw up. It was a rough day. Thank you, Steve and Jackie, for taking care of me. I don't know what it was, Lenora. It was just a combination of things. The food maybe was part of it. We're trying to decide whether we really like the food or not. What's our consensus? Yeah, kind of. It was kind of good and kind of, but the places that we stayed were all first-class hotels, so it seemed like, magnificent accommodations. And the food was oriented for Westerners, I think, but it still had a very sort of Mediterranean, Egyptian, Israeli sort of feel to it. So, any other major sights and sounds from Egypt that people want to talk about, remember, help us to envision before we hopefully see these pictures? Oh, that's right. Anne and Sandy and Jean. Oh, hello, Elise. I hope you went to the right meeting. Cumin, the spices. What, anybody want to try to field that question? What? Okay, the question, here, Lenora, why don't you ask this question again? Here, use the microphone.
I said, if you go to India, I've never been, but any Indian restaurants, they use tons of, what's it, cumin? Okay. I don't like the way it smells, so even before I taste the food, I don't like the smell of it. So I was asking, what was it about the food that all of you said, is there a spice they use or what was it about it?
My disappointment, I'm a foodie and I love to cook, and I like to cook international food. Oh, sorry. But what I was disappointed is the food quality was good every place we went, but there were larger hotels, there were a lot of buses of people from different countries, and so you had so many choices of what to pick from. It wasn't just, one vegetable, that was a huge cafeteria. So that was nice, but I was hoping to experience more authentic food as opposed to the touristy version. And it wasn't bad, it was industrialized. I like spice and the authentic, and well, we both do. So that was our disappointment, but the food was good.
Yeah, I understand, I got it.
How many lunches did we have of chicken and rice and a sort of plantains or whatever they were? And after a while, I think that made me sick practically by itself. No salad in Jordan. Yeah, we weren't. We were trying to avoid green leafy things. Yeah. Yeah. Salad. Yes. Never eat. Yeah. But anyway, we'll move on. We left Egypt and we flew to Jordan. We went to Amman, Jordan, and when we got to Jordan, we got on a bus, and we basically went to this place called Mount Horeb, I think is what it was called. And Mount Horeb was sort of like we went up, and there was a big vista, and this is, according to tradition again, we just talked about this as well, is this really the spot where Moses looked out over the promised land? Tradition has it that this is where all the Israelites gathered with Moses, and they looked out over the promised land. Down below is the River Jordan, and beyond is Israel, which would have been the promised land. But because of what happened at Petra, which we're going to get to in a second, and where Moses struck the rock and the water came out, but for whatever reason, that made God angry and said, Moses, you're not going to be allowed to go into the promised land. Now, could anybody figure out the reason for that? That's lost in Bible mystery, I think, in God's mind, why that angered God so much. But anyway, Moses wasn't allowed to cross into the promised land with the Israelites. So a successor, Joshua, was chosen, and they crossed the River Jordan into the promised land. But we saw that site, and it was spectacular, and it was moving, because it's like, this is the spot where, Moses stood and the Israelites, and they, beheld what was to come. After that, we went to the hotel, which was down near the Dead Sea, right on the Dead Sea. Again, a spectacular hotel. That was really amazing, that place. It was the Crown Plaza Dead Sea on the Jordan side. And you could look over and see Israel on the other side of the Dead Sea. So the Dead Sea is not exactly like one of the Great Lakes. It's more like, we're getting there. That's the that's the laptop that we're using in the back. That's the screenshot. All right, so I'll go through this quickly. So in Jordan, we were at the Dead Sea Crown Plaza Hotel. The next day we got up and we did journey down to Petra. Oh, we got it. So let me just wrap this up fast. We went to Petra. It was an amazing sight. Some of us rode camels there, rode horses, went down through the valley and saw the treasury at the bottom and came back. In Jordan, we also saw a Roman city ruins. And then let's move it through. We went the next day, we crossed the River Jordan and went into Israel. Went to a hotel. The next day, we did a baptism at the site that tradition has it that Jesus was baptized by John. And I was able to do a baptism for Zaire, who apparently is in Jamaica right now. But that was a really sort of powerful, moving moment for me, and I think for many of us. And others were sort of rebaptized, which, as Methodists, we don't believe in rebaptism, do we? No. So, yeah, we remembered our baptism, and we let some of the other folks who that's part of their tradition, we let them do that. We didn't say it was wrong, just let them do that. We didn't do that, but Zaire had never been baptized. But anyway, we were up near the Sea of Galilee, and we stayed in a place called Tiberias. And that's where we then also kind of traveled around the Sea of Galilee, and we saw some of the sites where Jesus would have done his first ministry, the home where he sort of lived, and headquarters called Capernaum. We saw ruins there. We saw different synagogues. We saw the place where the feeding of the 5,000 happened on the hills around, and we did a boat ride out onto the Sea of Galilee, which was really magnificent. And so Galilee was a very beautiful place. The next day we got up and we went down south. We kind of went by, sort of by and through the West Bank and went to Bethlehem. And that's